On this edition of A-10 Hoops Talk, we'll focus on some of the great coaches that have roamed the A-10 hardwood. We recognize that there are a lot of current and former A-10 coaches deserving of all the praise. But for this show, we've landed on 4. Find out who they are on A-10 Hoops Talk, Beyond the Paint, starting right now. Hey everybody, welcome to the A-10 studio here in Washington, D.C. and A-10 Hoops Talk, Beyond the Paint. I'm Tom McCarthy, and joining me is longtime St. Joseph's head coach Phil Martelli. For the next 30 minutes, we'll be talking about some great former and current A-10 coaches. And Phil, you and I have talked about this over the years. The A-10 has produced so many good coaches. Why is that?
Because these men were men of character without being characters. It was all about the values that they had, and they brought it forth in their programs, in their teams, and in the competition.
Well, one of those guys joins us right now, Mike Jarvis, the former head basketball coach at George Washington, among other schools. Obviously, BU, St. John's, the list goes on and on. He's been nice enough to join us here today. Mike, first and foremost, thank you for joining us. And I guess the one thing I want to ask you more than anything else, when you were coaching Patrick Ewing in high school, did you ever think that you would climb the ranks to be such a prestigious college coach?
Honestly, I dreamt about it, but I didn't think it would ever happen. And the reason is it took me so long to just get to that position. And at that time, there were only a handful of black coaches coaching in Division I. So no, I didn't think it would happen.
The international recruiting was it because of DC? Was it because of connections? You're a people person. Was it the connections first, or was it DC that enabled you to bring in that international flavor to your teams?
It was probably common sense, Phil. I knew that we were not going to be able to out-recruit Georgetown and Maryland. They were going to get the 5-star recruits. We would end up getting whatever we could. So we decided that we had to do something different. We had to be innovative. And I had on my staff at that time a fellow by the name of Scott Beaton, who had many connections with European coaches. So I took advantage of his connections, and we started to travel the world. And I would never forget where we were fortunate enough to see a young Alexander Kool and Yegor Masharikov play for Belarus. And that's where it really, really began. And then, once you get one international player and they like it, the word spreads, and before you know it, we had more players from other countries on our team than I think any other school in the history of NCAA Division I basketball.
And it's pretty impressive, the tentacles that college basketball has. Mike, you went on to coach at St. John's after GW and other spots as well. But give us an idea of how competitive the Atlantic 10 was and still is when you were the head coach at GW.
Well, first of all, the guy you're sitting next to, helped to put the Atlantic 10 on the map. And in fact, I was walking down memory lane yesterday, Phil, and I saw a picture that's hanging on one of my walls, and it was my first Atlantic 10 victory. And guess what? It was against St. Joe's. But at that time, the Atlantic 10, actually, I think, and we all believe, we were a better league than the Big East. We were getting more teams into the NCAA tournament. We had, the names of coaches. I mean, you talk about Martelli, you talk about Calipari, Cheney, Gil Catlett. You just go. Each team had a great coach, and every coach was different. The styles were different. The home courts. I mean, the toughest court that I think I ever played in was St. Joe's. We lost some incredibly close games there that I never forget. And, so the home court was a real home court advantage in the A-10. We didn't play in coliseums. We played in little bandboxes, and every one was really unique.
Throwbacks to when you were a high school coach. Gyms, not arenas.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. And in fact, when high school, when I was fortunate enough to coach Patrick Ewing, we played in a lot of arenas. When I went to GW, it was like when I first started coaching in high school. And you call them gyms. You don't call them arenas.
Well, Mike, we appreciate it. Not only we appreciate your legacy as a head basketball coach, but we appreciate you joining us here today. When we come back, we'll be joined by Shaka Smart and talk about his days at VCU. So stay tuned. Welcome back to A-10 Hoops Talk, Beyond the Pain. All right, Phil, I know you know our next guest really well. We both know him very well. Give me what you like most about Shaka Smart.
He has unconditional love for every member of his program. That's one. And number two, his ability to step forward now and take a leadership role in our profession. We needed Shaka Smart. He's come through in spades for this entire profession.
Well, Shaka Smart does join us now, the head coach at Marquette, who started his head coaching career at VCU, first in the CAA, then in the A-10. Shaka, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's great to be here with you guys.
Let me ask you first about cutting your teeth at VCU and what that meant to you, not only in the CAA, but also in the A-10.
Well, VCU is a special place, and I don't know if there's a better community or environment to get a chance to be a head coach in, especially as a young coach. And I believe my first year or two, I think it was an average of like 5 teams got in the NCAA tournament. So it was a heck of a challenge. St. Louis was actually the best team in the league at that point. Jim Cruz had done a heck of a job following Rick Majerus. But what a fun basketball league.
Chuck, there are people out there who are going to be watching this. They don't know Havoc. Can you describe Havoc? And then the backside of that is, when did you decide, as a young coach, when did you decide this is the way we're going to play?
Well, it was kind of a rolling decision. I don't know if there was ever really one point. I was fortunate that I played and coached for a lot of pressing coaches and a lot of aggressive coaches. Most notably Billy Donovan, who I was an assistant for before coming to VCU. And when I had my opening press conference, as you know, Coach Martelli, you really don't know what you're doing when you're a young coach and you get that press conference and they stick a microphone in your face. But I made the comment, I said, we're going to wreak havoc on our opponent's psyche and plan of attack. And at that time, I didn't know that we were going to use that moniker to describe our style of play. But a couple months later, a friend of mine was in town meeting with our staff, and we talked about how at that time the mid-major or mid-major plus landscape was really, really crowded, and we needed to find a way to separate ourselves. And so we talked about havoc and playing with a level of aggressiveness. But to be honest with you, as you know, Coach, it's all about the players. And so the fact that we had Briante Weber wearing number 2 in a VCU uniform had everything to do with the fact that we led the nation in steals 3 consecutive years.
Well, you mentioned Briante Weber. Obviously, you went to the Final Four while in the CAA, but you won the A-10 postseason tournament with Briante and Travion Graham. What kind of an impact did those two guys have on your program?
Well, that was the best team that we had at VCU. I believe we were 17-3 when Bree tore his knee up, and he did it bad. It was ACL, meniscus, MCL. That was one of the worst days of my career, just going through that with him, because when it's a senior and it's at that point in the season, it was late January, that's it. There's no redshirt year, and his career is over. But those two guys were just foundational members of our program. They were like fire and ice because they couldn't have been any different from each other. Trey, very soft-spoken, very humble, Briante, not so much. But he led the country in enthusiasm and competitiveness. The thing about the A-10, and Coach Martelli knows this, is when you go on the road in the A-10, it doesn't matter where you go, it is going to be a war.
Shaq, one final question. Why are you today a better coach than the young Shaka Smart?
Well, I mean, I think I know more now what I didn't know and what I still don't know. I think when you're a young coach, you feel like you got all the answers, and then, when things don't go your way, you get smacked across the face, and it's like there's a real struggle that you go through because you don't know what you don't know. As you get older and you go through different experiences, you realize that, our program is not the center of the universe. There's a lot of other things going on around us. And so we need to make sure that we're giving a lot more perspective to ourselves as coaches, to the players that we coach. And sometimes that makes you a lot better as a team.
Well, Shaka, we've enjoyed watching you evolve over the years, and we can't thank you enough for coming on with us today. And we wish you nothing but the best the rest of the year.
Well, thank you guys. I'm a big fan of both you guys. We had some real battles with Coach Martelli and St. Joe's. We were talking about it the other day when he was up here, and man, they got the better of us. They got the better of us in the A-10 championship in, I think that was 2014. But then, you know what? I looked up a couple years later, and like 3 of those guys were in the NBA, so I didn't feel so bad.
Well, thank you, Shaka. We appreciate it. Next up, we'll welcome in 2 more longtime A-10 coaches, Mark Schmidt and Chris Mooney. So stay with us. We hope you're enjoying A-10 Hoops Talk as we look at a few of the great coaches in A-10 history. Now, we've already talked to a couple of them, but now we're going to talk to guys that have been at their programs for a long period of time. Kind of like you, Phil. You were at St. Joseph's as an assistant coach and a head coach for 34 years. What was it like to be at one institution for that long a period of time?
The immediate word that jumps into your mind is comfort. It's if you're a slippers kind of guy, you wear your slippers at night. If you're in the summertime, you wear your flip-flops. But you know the security guards. You know where you're going to stay when you go on the road. You know the referees. You know the conference office. It's all a matter of comfort in a profession where there's a lot of churning that goes on inside, to look around and say, I got this. Everything's going to be all right. And we may not win or lose, but we're not going to be disorganized. The other thing is the relationships. You build relationships. And our next 2 guests are friends. They're not guys I coached against, right? Chris Mooney at Richmond and Mark Schmidt at St. Bonaventure. They're lifelong friends. And I am really appreciative of the relationships that we've developed.
Well, speaking of those 2 guys, Mark's been at St. Bonaventure for 18 years. Meanwhile, Chris Mooney's been at Richmond for 20 years. Guys, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much for this. I'll ask you the same question, Mark, that I asked Phil. What is it like to be at one institution in the Atlantic 10 for as long as you have been?
First of all, I'm not the wolf. And at Bonaventure, we don't wear flip-flops. We wear winter boots. And Phil hit it right on the head. It's about relationships. And Chris and I are really lucky. I think, when you take a job, you just never know how long you're going to be there. And, I think the average is like 3 or 4 years and you get fired. They get sick of you or you get sick of them. And I think we've been at schools where the administrations have been really good. And it's the relationships that I've built over 18 years, they're special. And I've never been any place longer in my career. So we have deep roots here. We have really good friends. And that's one of the reasons why it's been a special place for us.
As Mark touched on in terms of the administration, it's never felt transactional at Richmond for me. And therefore, then I can coach the team that way, that I'm not trying to get this many points or rebounds out of a particular guy. You're coaching the guy to be as good of a player as he can be. Hopefully he's there for a long time. And then the roots that we have in the community. Both our boys were born here and raised. This is what they know as home. And there's something really, really comforting about that. And as Coach said, in terms of it being an anxious profession and having that calmness in terms of when you travel, who you're playing against. I don't think I know the referees quite as well as Phil Martelli did, but it does have some rewards.
Really excited to talk to you seasoned veterans. Some may call you grizzled. I won't. What I would like to focus on is, where are you with the state of the game, the state of the conference, the state of the profession?
I think that the league is in great shape. I think we have, very good coaches, really good players. I think it's up on the upswing. In terms of the business, I think it's a little out of whack. I'm a firm believer that the kids should get paid, but they shouldn't be getting paid what they're getting paid. I think it's we're doing, in my opinion, a little bit of an injustice. We're paying them. Some kids are getting paid a lot of money, and once their career is over, and they get a teaching job at Olean High School for $40,000, they'd be like, "What the heck is going on?" So it's we got to put some parameters on, and hopefully we do that, in the near future. But I think our league is really good, and it's going to continue to be good.
Yeah, I agree. The conference is great. I grew up in Philadelphia as a huge A-10 fan and would be at the Spectrum for the conference tournament. And I think the league is in great shape. You have so many schools really committed to basketball.
Guys, let's talk about some of the players who have impacted your program. Mark, you had Andrew Nicholson at St. Bonaventure, and he's one of my favorite players that I've watched over the years. What was the impact that he had on your program?
I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Andrew Nicholson. I'd be fired. We got really lucky with Andrew. No one really recruited him. No one really knew about him. And, he came here, and it's an amazing story. He bench pressed 85 pounds as a freshman. Mooney can do that right now. And he just got better and better. And, he was just, he's better than what we thought. And he carried us. He gave us the first Atlantic 10 championship in the school's history. And he really, he set the bar, and he set the bar on how you're supposed to be as a student athlete. He's the first player in the history of the NBA to hold a degree in physics, and be a first round pick. And even Mooney didn't do that. So yeah, he really set the tone and showed, future Bonaventure players what it's like to be and how you should be as a basketball player at Bonaventure.
Chris, you had so many good players, but Kevin Anderson's a guy that comes to mind for me. What did he mean for your program?
Everything. We recruited him. We signed him in the May of his senior year in high school. He had one other college scholarship, I think Western Carolina. I think one thing is when you have great players, what I learned from Kevin Anderson and TJ Klein, Jacob Gilliard is they can teach you just as much. And when they do something on the floor, you might correct them and say, "Hey, that's not how we do it." And then you're watching the film later and you say, "Yeah, that's probably how we should do it." If he's that was the first thing. Kevin just changed who we were totally in terms of just his ability to do everything well and know the game so well, score critical baskets, and just had an incredible impact on Richmond basketball.
So when you look at this league over the course of time, and that's right, Schmitty, it is league. Let's get that straight, okay? When you look at the league over the course of your career, the opponents that have kept you up the most nights, we all have those guys, those teams that we fear in our heart. Who's your guy?
Richmond. Like the zone, the matchup zone, or whatever the heck I would just stay up all night trying to figure out how to get shots against the thing. I'm serious. I think that zone that Richmond played was really, really effective. And when they have players, really good players like they have, had in terms of, they don't play that matchup anymore, I don't think. But it was, really well coached, and their offense, hard to guard. Is really hard to guard. So, yeah, I'll Mooney, even though I bust him, yeah, he does a hell of a job.
Yeah, I would return that. I mean, going up to Bonnie's is always difficult. The crowd's going to be great. The 200 sets that you have to see, the adjustments, really, really impressive. Of course, also for us, VCU is, just because it's such a big school in our area, the rivalry is very intense. They have so many students, so many workers. I know so many people who are affiliated with VCU, so I hear about it an awful lot. So those two for me are probably the most.
We appreciate you being with us today and everything that you've done for the Atlantic 10. So thank you very much for being on with us today.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Thank you.
Stay with us on A-10 Hoops Talk. Coach Martelli will go into overtime about the great coaches in the A-10. Welcome back to A-10 Hoops Talk, and this is one of my favorite sessions of our show. It's our overtime segment. This is where Phil Martelli pontificates about topics that we look at around college basketball and beyond, and today it's about coaching.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it. All of us are members of various teams throughout our lives: community organizations, church groups, schools, families, athletic teams are all in need of coaches. What are the characteristics that we coaches share? We build real relationships. We organize. Remember, no one wants to follow someone who doesn't know where they are going. We provide energy, put people in position to achieve, play to their strengths. We understand that our words matter. We joyfully celebrate others' successes, willingly taking on the role of teacher and student every day, and we truly value the power of thank you. Coaching is what you do, but it must never supersede who you are. Lead and lift those that are around you so that the team's successes will lead to a shared sense of contentment and accomplishment. Leader, teacher, difference maker, all synonymous with coach. You can, we can, and will and must be all of these.
Well, I think we saw that today with all of our guests, which we appreciate them joining us for this edition of A-10 Hoops Talk. Until next time, for Phil Martelli, I'm Tom McCarthy. So long, everybody.